Hi, my name is Benedict. In this video, we're looking at Reason's workflow for film scoring. Now, some of you are going to say, oh, you can't score film in Reason because it doesn't host video. Yeah, it doesn't natively, but if you look a little harder, you can find VST or other solutions to run video in line with Reason. They have their limits, but they work, and they definitely work well enough. I know because I've scored quite a few little movies, won awards for them, and various other movies for family and what have you. The solution that I use is called VidPlay VST. This is not going to be a how-to on VidPlay VST because it's pretty easy to use. You will obviously need to open it up from your rack. I recommend hit and keep open. You're going to need to load a video. Very strongly, I will suggest that you keep the video in the same place. So it will automatically save your video and open it back up. It will lock to time. And this does it pretty reliably. Simply, but reliably. You're then going to want to arrange this in your screen or your screen set in a way that you can work without it being in the way. On one screen, nightmare. Multiple screens, I will move this into the middle monitor where I have my mixer set up, because I'm not using my mixer when I'm composing. Up to you how you manage it, but if you're only using one screen, this is going to be a bit of a nightmare very, very fast. So you're going to need at least a second monitor is my advice. This also has the ability to go into full screen, so when you want to become immersive, you're generally not going to be able to compose that way, but you can. We will look at that in a mo. The scene that I am using actually comes from the rather lovely Marika Shantz. I have no relationship with her whatsoever. I just found this online. It's actually increasingly difficult to find videos that you can score to, and I will not download somebody's trailer or whatever and score against that because it's highly immoral, highly illegal, even if only doing it for yourself. I mean, if it never leaves your home, then no, but as soon as you publish it anywhere as though it's your work, even if you're acknowledging what you did, it is highly illegal. So don't do that. That's not a workflow fail, that's a professionalism fail, which will mean that people will dodge you big time, or at least decent people will dodge you big time. Don't do that. So thank you, Marika. She's actually a film composer and a 3D animator, so I found her just through Googling and downloaded this scene because it was the one that amused me the most with 2 seconds of looking. So let's have a look. Here is one I prepared earlier. We can pop this into full screen. I know that's screen number 2. I'm going to shunt that back to the very beginning and press play. So if I press escape, this comes back. Yes, you'll see that it still says it's there, but there we go, we are all here. General strengths and weaknesses of film scoring in Reason. There are, of course, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and each has a fair impact. Reason's tremendous ease of use is wonderful for scoring, because film scoring you generally need to move quickly. If you're not moving quickly, you're probably obsessing and probably not focusing on the story. Half of this was written just as it was going. It was rubato real time. It's a pretty common technique with film composers. And so you need to move quickly, you need to be able to move easily. So the ease of use, the clarity of Reason is a massive plus for me and many other people who work that way. A more complex seeming door might seem like you can do more stuff, but if it's slowing you down, bad plan. Sound design. Reason is a massive sound designer's paradise. Absolutely everything you hear in here was made by hand in here. I did have the string before I brought in the video. I was making it for this, I just didn't have the video. So the string was already there. I was going to be focusing on some different things about sound articulation and what have you, but you know what, no one cares. If they want that whole orchestra thing, they're just going to download the orchestra or something or other, action strings. So people would need to chase up and give me good reason to want to make far more detailed video about sound design and articulation of synthesizers to what have you. Not going into that, but sound design overall, every single sound, as I say, was made inside here, so it was all designed to fit and working within the feel of this. So from the sound effects, which run all the way through, because there's no Foley in this, a completely silent film, through to all the instruments, all made by hand as pure synthesis. Great for that. Reason is also rate agnostic. And that's a small plus here, but you know what? It's a total pain in the patootie if you are doing something and your DAW is not rate agnostic. Meaning that as you put in things of different rates, you can suddenly find that things don't work. The one caveat that I have found with that, and it's a non-starter really, is that VidPlay VST, if you change rates, it is prone to playing back wrong. So if you suddenly find that your video isn't playing back the way that it should, then close Reason entirely, give it a few moments to completely leave Windows, kernel buffer, what have you, whatever's going on in there, and then start it again with the new improved rate setup. Not that you set up rates in this, but it's more likely to happen if you change the rate that you're working at, or more likely if you change your playback device, because that often can change a rate as well. Then it'll play back wrong. So if you have problems where it's not playing back right, chances are you just need to close down, open back up again. But don't start this and start meddling around with different drivers, and then, because chances are you can compose to the wrong cue points. But generally very, very easy to use, and its rate agnosticness means that you can throw anything into the sequencer without worrying about things conflicting with each other. There are some limits with regards to Reason. Obviously, there is no built-in video support. We covered that, and we have a very viable solution with VidPlay VST. There may be newer things in VST3 or whatever. I don't know. I haven't even gone over to have a look at this for years. But it does work, and I've found it very, very robust so long as you are not messing around. Messing around and score composing are two completely different things. We are missing in Reason some of what we might consider the more advanced features. I don't really miss them at all. One of them, for example, is where I have played in rubato. Some people would then go, oh, but I need to fit that to the grid, so commonly referred to as remapping. So it takes my MIDI and says, okay, we will now call this your bar structure and add all of the tempo changes and what have you to make it line up. I just use Reason as a tape recorder in that sense. Tape doesn't come with a click on it. I mean, you can make it do that, but tape per se doesn't come with a click on it. You just press record, and whatever you do will come straight back. So I use Reason halfway that way, and I can go backwards and forwards when scoring between using it as a freeform tape and rigid sequence bits. So I just don't go, hasn't got the feature, I've got to have a panic. I just make it work. It's very, very easy. You stop thinking about that, and it's an issue, but not that much of an issue at all. So yes, some advantageous features aren't there, but you honestly don't need them if you work at grassroots, and I'm a big fan of working at grassroots because it's simpler. Directors' mindset, particularly amateur directors, you have a couple of problems. One is that a lot of them will never have heard of Reason, and because they haven't heard of it, they will assume that you are the fool. Well, my dear, you are the fool if you don't know the tools used, or more to the point, you are the fool if you assume that because you've never heard of it, that it's bullshit. That probably says you are bullshit. So be cautious of directors who are total raving amateurs. They'll probably tell you how professional they are, who will judge you because they don't know your tools. That's just wanker mentality. If they are that much of a wanker on the beginning, don't work for them, because they will be a bigger wanker when it comes to the difficulties, because scoring inevitably has difficulties, and I have met those. The other massive issue that we face, and again I blame that on amateur director mindset or amateur mindset, is the massive increase in use of library and now AI. It's virtually impossible to find any scoring work now because amateur directors just go, oh, well, that's too hard, I'll just use library, or I will use AI and make shit and attach that to my supposedly non-shit movie, making my supposedly non-shit movie into shit. Don't meddle with them. They don't understand what they're doing. They don't appreciate the value of music in their movies. Stay the hell away from them. So be very aware of, if you're working with a director, particularly if you're working with a director, as in you are not getting paid, because most amateur directors have no money and they are not wise enough to realise that you've got to have a budget. And if you don't allow music as part of your budget, well, you just... So be very, very cautious there. All right, let's move forward. The first thing to be aware of is you need a scoring mindset. I've covered a fair amount of that already. Films need to work more often than not with themes. If you watch a great film or a great TV show, great examples being obviously Star Wars. Star Wars has some incredibly established themes. Ba 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 da. Or of course Jaws. Dum 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 dum. Build themes early on. It's more important to build themes early on than to just wander around. I admit I have largely wandered or stumbled around and composed this as I'm actually seeing the film. So it's not a great score, but it's not meant to be. It's just an example. But build themes early, and that way you can then modify your themes. If we do dig into this, then you can actually see where I have established some themes and then modified them. In purely musician terms, that's called variation. So when you look anywhere in the Star Wars environment, even the new stuff, I was hearing some established themes in the Skeleton Crew, the one with the kids. Every now and then it'd be like, that's that. There's John Williams' theme again. And this is really important in filmmaking, to tie things together. So understand themes, understand variation, or you will struggle. Let the scene and story lead. So the reason that I could get something that was coherent enough on this was that in the first part, I'm just working rubato. As I said, this is just tape player, but I'm watching the scene. If you watch the original official video for Blade Runner, when Vangelis is doing Blade Runner or Chariots of Fire, then you will actually see him playing his instrument and watching the film. This is how a lot of composers work. So stay focused in the scene and story, not on yourself. This is not about you, this is about helping sell the scene, the story, the feeling, the emotions of what's in the film. I see a lot of film score made that is just somebody, well, basically with their hands down their pants going, look how clever I am. It's irritating and it reduces the value of the film. A poor quality film, one that's a bit naff, something that's probably even less experienced than, say, Asylum, Sharknado, it can be enhanced quite notably or normalised with a decent score, a careful scoring. A thoughtful scoring, not about technicalities, not about how big their orchestra is or how pretend their MIDI orchestra samples are. It's just about, is it used wisely to help us feel good? If it's scrappy, you can take an okay film and make it seem like, well, not very good. And I see quite a few of those because I end up watching quite a few films in afternoons when I'm doing other things, and a lot of those things on Netflix are just, they're undone by poor quality scoring. That is related to the next point, which is just about flow. Things have to flow. If your score doesn't flow, then you're going to make your film seem incredibly disjointed. Always enhance the film, don't swamp it. That's basically what I've been saying with all the above. Always enhance the film for the viewer, not for your perspective of saying, look, I used 47 action strings instances here. That's hands down pants. That's not enhancing the film for the viewer. Enhance the film, don't swamp it. And in that sense, less can commonly be more. In many ways, I have probably overdone this, but there was no Foley, there was no anything. I wanted to show several techniques all happening at once. The common thing that we're going to do when we're scoring a film is we're going to know what's going on and we're going to work to certain cue points. Obviously, first cue point here is we've got to bring the film in. There's a little bit of black at the beginning of this, and so I've used that to set a scene. So even though it's a second or so, we've still established some sense of a scene in here. We've got our funny little background noise, which is somewhere between watery, thundery, noisy, what have you, and this pad that's noisy like a bowed glass bottle almost. Yay, FM. And so that sets a sense of scene. We've got certain cue points in here. Now, I did all of this just by feel, so if we're watching, we've got celloing away. That's a point where the video jumps. I have acknowledged that in the playing, but I haven't made too big a deal of it. It's really important to never overdo cue points or hit points, that being where there's something in the action. We've got another one coming up. So notice as the vision starts to move forward up these stairs, the music changes slightly. It just reflects that. And again, I'm making this up as I go, as I'm just watching and playing. And then this changes. So note how the music changes as well. I've gone from an entirely rubato section, as in none of this lines up to anything. It's just played completely loosey-goosey. It's feel and nothing but. And then we start to move into a sequenced section. You will also see that I suddenly put in a tempo move. I've been running at 120 because who knows? And then I've decided, okay, that's the point where I want to change things. As we establish ourselves in this sort of corridory thing, then I want to start to change things. I'm easing in this bass, heartbeat kind of a thing, but I'm keeping my existing FM pad going. If you suddenly change all your instruments, that can be great or it can be problematic. Often it is problematic. Again, I note a lot of poor quality scores where they just change things completely. Keep an overlap. Here there is an overlap, plus there's the fade. So we've got a period of in-between, because it turns out we're actually in between as we move into this area. And there's more going on in this scene or this section than you might initially realise. I have this clarinet, again made in here to emulate this sort of Egyptian-y kind of a feel. I wrote the line and then I modified the line. It's really important. We've got to keep working on change. So where I wrote this in C major, the only key worth caring about, I then thought, look, it's okay, but I can push my point further if I start playing with some sharps as well. So I simply moved the notes around so that the movement is a lot closer. We've got a lot of semitone movement here rather than tone movement. Because in C major, you've really only got one or two places, B to C, E to F, which are semitone movement. The rest of it's tonal movement. Whereas if we move it to semitone movement, we get something that screams Egyptian, Arabic, what have you. It's just tomfoolery, but it changes the feel. We've been in a simple C major key to suddenly being this exotic, tense key. God knows what the key scale is, don't care, it serves my purpose. The other thing that's happening here is that I am working a little more rigidly to hit points now. And that's more shown in the other thing that occurs here. Well, the other things that occur here. You'll see that I changed the filter. So the filter is opening as we go through here, and then it closes. You'll hear that it starts to seem more muted. So that's as we get closer, it gets a little louder and brighter, and as we're moving away, it gets more muted and quieter. So the two of those, we don't need that point. Subtle movements. You won't necessarily notice them in the top of your head, but they're there and they help us to focus. But there's also this. When we're watching that, this is panning that lead sound around. Sorry about the noisy neighbours if you can hear them. It's panning that lead sound around, actually borrowing from video games. So what happens is the obelisk becomes the centre of attention, and I pan that clarinet so that as long as you've got your speakers in the centre of your viewing, as we move around in that space, the panning moves. So it moves left here a bit, centres up, and moves left as this goes over onto our side. And then centres, and you can hear it becoming more dull as we go through. This is all about creating flow, working to the scene and story, and creating change, movement inside here. This helps the viewer to feel like there's more happening in here, that it's a richer environment. Most people aren't going to be sitting perfectly in the centre of their system, and it doesn't matter. They'll still somehow be aware of that movement, even if they're watching with a little mono speaker. It'll still have some impact. We can be aware of those things. I don't fully know how, but psychoacoustics is a fascinating subject. So we've got movement, we've got our cue points. I have moved tempo here, like I slowed this thing down up to this point, and then I've sped the tempo back up to this point. So I've decided where my cue points are. So I've said, okay, my first section is going to go till here. My second section is going to go till here. But I'm also going to change the timing a little. So you again don't notice, but this gets faster as we go, which adds a little bit of impetus, push, excitement if we want to be simplistic. And then I actually drop that tempo again as we go underground. So that FM pad actually drops an octave or two. It's quite notably goes downhill. Here, it's got doubled up, but we also, it's annoying having to move this all the time, have automation to drop its level, so it becomes less dominant at this point. Musically, there's not a lot going on in here because I want it to seem more mysterious. Because we've got our, let's bring our sound effect in. And this also gives a sense of passage of time. We've just got that heartbeat bass. This sort of unsettling, thundery, big things movement. Then our pad rises. And we're going into a different place. We don't know where that's going, but we would suggest that in a normal film, once we've got this happening, ooh, maybe we've travelled through time, whatever, we don't know what the story is, but I give the impression that there is something happening here. So we're leading up to it with this. I did first compose the big brass thing, the big fanfare thing, but to smooth it all over, I took these themes, used an existing instrument that we already knew, created a slight variation of that, and then brought the whole damn lot in together to be. Because it has to end somehow. I mean, just fizzling out would seem sort of pointless. One would assume in a movie that we would go somewhere. Suddenly there's the Pharaoh or Medusa and whatever's going to happen. I just invented that because, well, I like to be grand. So make sure that as you're working, set what your cue point is, so you're always working towards something. It's easy to start and then go, oh, but what happens next? With film composing, it's really important you're always working towards an end goal. Now, in composing, you should always really ideally be working this way as well. Okay, I've started my verse. My end point has to be my chorus or my break between my verse and my chorus. If you're not thinking towards that, then you can find yourself dangerously out of place and you can't get your verse and your chorus to match, or your little bridge between your verse and your chorus, your break, is really weird. Occasionally that can end up with some really interesting results, like Funky Town. Doom doop doo doom doop doo doom doop doo. It's just a turnaround. They're just working from where they were back to somewhere else. How much that was planned, I don't know, but you can find yourself having to do odd things like that, which more often than not just sound broken. Whereas if you've planned ahead and you've said, okay, I'm going to run this scene to this point here, and then I'm going to run this scene to this point here, and then I'm going to run this scene to this point here, and then blah, blah, blah. So set your points and use your tempo to control them. Unless you've got the settings set, and there's no reason to set the settings set, then your film will just keep going at the same speed, but your door is changing speed underneath it, meaning that you can very precisely say, at this point I want to be exactly here. by changing your tempo up, down, little increments. And the more complex the film, the more tempo movements you can have. Just don't overdo it. Because remember, if you've got too many hit points in a film, then it just seems really, really amateur. You've got no flow. It just becomes jerking from one place to another. Not cool. When it comes to mixing, obviously we want to mix for clarity more than anything else. Remember, primarily people listen on little speakers. So if it isn't going to work on, and I never tested this, but I'm sure it will work just fine, if it's going to work on a laptop or something like that, white noise is a bit much, I admit. You're never going to hear though. This works just fine. Matter of fact, you could hear something there that I did do, I forgot to mention here. With the noise, it's the same noise all the way through, but I actually alter the way that certain things work inside that, and also the tone. So when we're outside, there is a lot more high end. When we go underground, you can actually see the high end disappear. Comes back towards the end, but that's just me speculating. I also changed the delay balance, the echo balance. So when we're outside, not much echo. When we get underground, huge amount of echo there. So it just changes the feel, which helps us to feel like we have changed state as the viewer. So mixing is really important because we help the viewer to feel the changes of state, which is what we saw with moving the panning based on keeping that clarinet as though the obelisk were the clarinet. So it pans based on how we are with reference to it. Whether films do that much, I don't know, but video games definitely do. So seeing this as very video gamey in look, it makes perfect sense to do that. There is no right, there is no rule of doing this. It's just when you're looking at it, you should have a sense of feel. Now, bearing in mind, you're not always going to be doing the mixing if you're the composer. You could well be exporting tracks, stems, whatever they want. So don't go mixing if they want to do the mix themselves, because the more you meddle with that, the harder it is for them to actually get the mix they want and need. But mix for balance and clarity more than anything else. Don't go thinking that this is an EDM mix that you need to run at minus 0.00000, stupid, pathetic, tiny number of laughs, because A, it won't float, and B, it won't float. So mix subtly, mix carefully. If they want a brutal mix, they'll ask for it or simply do it themselves. Then when it comes to exporting, as I said, we're generally going to want one of two things. If you're doing the mixing, then you might find that they ask you to submit in 16-bit 48K. This is pretty normal in film, simply because in certain frame rates that a 1648 just fits a little bit better than a 1644. It's not about quality, it's just about the frame rates line up a little bit better. So if that's what they want, great. If not, then send them a 1644 or whatever, but sending somebody something like a stupid high bit rate because it's more pro is probably, again, hands down pants. If they want something better, they'll ask. If they don't, then go with a 1644. If they turn around and ask for a stupid high rate, give it to them, or tell them to get over themselves. But 1648 is quite common on film work. If you want, you can work in 1648 as well, if it amuses you. When you come to export, well, you could well just be exporting as audio file. So you just do your usual blah, 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 save off, and render to whatever rate. It is possible with VidPlay to actually render it into the video. It does work, but I'm not a fan of doing that way. I am far more hands-on than that. So I will already have my video, obviously, because I'm watching it. I'll put that into DaVinci Resolve. I'll have my exported audio, put that into DaVinci Resolve, and then glue them together there. Because I trust it a little bit better. Whatever floats your boat, whatever gets you there. If you are working with a director, especially an inexperienced one, send them a bounce, as in send them the video with the audio embedded, because chances are they will play it back in the wrong place. Even if you tell them, line this up at 0 and it will be perfect, they won't line it up at 0, they'll line it up at 47 minutes in and then start telling you missed every single cue point. Had it happen. So burn it when you send it across. You can send across a smaller film, doesn't have to be the whole size, because they shouldn't be checking your film, they should be just checking out how does it look. But these days it's so easy to move stuff backwards and forwards, just go with a full 1080. Oh, if they ask for export mixer channels, say you bounce mixer channels, and that's where I would export the master section and then each one of these. You can, depending upon what you want to do, export with absolutely nothing done to them, tapped before anything that's there. Entirely up to you. If I'm sending this to somebody else to mix, I might well normalize all of them, simply because that way they've got to come up with their own mix, not just crib off mine, but that's being mean. But still up to you. You want to send the least amount of pre-mix stuff, because if they're doing that, then they want to make their own mix, and if you influence them too much, but that's what the guide mix is for, they'll get a bounce down of what you thought was happening. Don't make a big fool of yourself over mixing, because music in films generally should be quiet. This is most likely far too loud. That's basically it. Keep it as simple as possible. VidPlay definitely does work, and it is pretty robust. The only times I've had fails is where I've done things, as I say, like changing the audio drivers, like for doing screencasts. Get your cue points early on so that you set them into stone, and invariably you're going to use tempo changes to help you nail those to bars. It doesn't really matter if you're working freeform, but there it still helps to say, okay, I'm going to lock this to a particular bar because our blocks then lock nice and easily. And it has no impact on the film, it just allows you to say, at exactly this point I'm doing this. You'll also note that I don't use markers. Some people are obsessed with like millions and millions of markers. I don't like markers because they're like me leaving notes for myself everywhere. What kind of person leaves notes all over their walls? So I just know. And you might go, oh, but it's like, well, it's my job to know. It's my job to feel. You know, in any relatively common story, we just know our marker points in that. It comes 12 o'clock and Cinderella runs away from the ball. We just know where that lies in the story, roughly. It's about there. So it's up to you, but the more you do by knowing, the better you will do with film, because it's faster, it's more engaged in the movie. So it's all about mindset, and it's not about gear. So you keep your mindset in the scene and story and not in the gear, and that's where Reason, to me, makes it so much easier, because there's virtually no gear happening here at all. It's just a big tape player that I can speed up and slow down to help me decide where I want my cue points to be. That's it. If you have specific questions or specific things that you want me to discuss, put them below. I'll either answer them directly below, or if I think it's worth it and enough people are interested, then I might make a spin-off video. Get out there.